7:19. Okay, under open session, we only have consideration to approve the employment of at-will staff. Need a motion?
The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve the employment of new and at-will staff as discussed in closed.
Mr. Bonilla, second.
Second.
By Mr. Mata, questions, concern? Not, all in favor? Motion passes. Item number 7, consent action items. A, consideration to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on October the 14 regular, October 21st special. And then we also have B, consideration to approve the monthly bills for October the 24th. I don't know if you want to do them individually or the minutes together, and then but the recommendation.
I don't know if there are any of you that were absent on these dates. If not, my recommendation is that you approve the minutes for the board held on October 14th and October 21st, and the monthly bills for October 2020 collectively.
Sir, I was going to make a motion that we do a consent action on both the minutes and the bills with 2 corrections to be made on the special board meeting minutes.
Go ahead.
It was on item 2 roll call. I believe there was a typo, ma'am, right?
There was roll call, there was Mr. Gabriel Espinosa, he was on there twice, so I corrected that. I emailed you those minutes, and also for the motion for
B, on the district improvement plan, the result of the voting was left out. That's it.
But have you,
We have a second.
Second.
Second by Sammy Houston. Any questions? Not any motion. All in favor? 7-0. We just did the, we didn't do the bills, right? Or was that included?
I had recommended it, but then Mr. Bonilla made a separate recommendation, so.
Did you also include the bills in your
Yes,
motion?
it was an item.
We're gonna go to item 8, action items. A, consideration and approval of resolution by the Board of Trustees, Crystal City Independent School District, establishing the district's intention to reimburse itself for the prior lawful expenditures of funds, the procedures of the tax exempt obligation to be issued to the district for authorized purposes and other matters in connection therewith. Ms. Veronica?
The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees approve the resolution as presented. We have Mr. Juan Aguilera that is ready to take on any questions. We have Mr. Solomon also, and Dawn and Matt from Hinojosa Estrada for any questions. So this is a resolution that we are asking that the Board of Trustees consider, and this is in consideration of any expenditure that would lawfully make available funds to the district should we enter into any type of bond. Mr. Aguilera, would you like to?
Yes, happy to do that. Good afternoon or good evening, board members. Good evening. Good to see everybody here. And thank you for allowing me to be able to talk to you via this Zoom connection. As I explained to Ms. Briones, I had a meeting earlier this afternoon here in San Antonio, and I would not have been able to make it all the way. As a matter of fact, I just made it home just a little while ago. Make it all the way to Crystal City. I believe that the Crystal City ISD has in the past adopted a reimbursement resolution. I know that this is something that is very common, and we see a lot of school districts and other governmental issuers that will adopt a reimbursement resolution. And as Ms. Briones stated, what it is the IRS, the rules require that an issuer, in this case, Crystal City ISD, if you want to reimburse yourself from a future tax exempt obligation that you issue, you need to have made a formal declaration. You need to, adopt a resolution that says, yeah, we may, and that may be a possibility of a reimbursement in the future. So, for example, if there are some expenditures, and if you adopt this resolution, this district, any expenditures are related to some projects that we have discussed and which are improvement to the building. I think we talked about drainage, fencing, and some other things, Ms. Briones, that you're considering.
Yes, we discussed the track, the remaining part of the track, the fencing, the automation of the fencing, and the drainage project that remains to be completed at high school.
Right. So if you make those expenditures today, or at least 60 days from prior from the adoption of this resolution, you may be able to, or you could be able to then reimburse yourself with a future issuance now of tax exempt obligations. This resolution does not obligate you in any way to issue anything in the future. But if you decide later on, or if you do issue some tax exempt obligations and you decide, well, let's go ahead and reimburse ourselves for those expenditures we made on the track, you will not be able to do that unless you have this resolution in place. The IRS rules stipulate that any expenditure related to those projects that were discussed by Ms. Briones can be reimbursed if they were made not more than 60 days from today's date, if you decide to adopt the resolution. And moving forward, you must reimburse yourself not more than 3 years from your original expenditure. So if there's an expenditure today, then you have 3 years to reimburse, to issue an obligation and then reimburse yourself. There's an additional exception that if you're an engineer or an architect says or signs an affidavit saying that you need more time to complete the projects, then you have up to 5 years from the original expenditure that is made. Again, you're not obligating yourself in any way to issue anything in the future. All you're doing is you're saying you may, or you don't have to reimburse yourselves for that matter with a future obligation. You may spend some money now and you may never want to reimburse yourself. But if you need to do that, or you decide later on that you should reimburse yourself with some of the expenditures that you have now, then this resolution is required to be in place, adopted and be in place. Are there any questions?
Jeff, Matt, Dawn, do you all have anything that you would like to add to Mr. Aguilera's explanation?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Matt Lujan with Estrada Hinojosa, and with me is our Senior Managing Director in San Antonio, Mr. Don Gonzalez, also with Estrada Hinojosa. So Mr. Aguilera, I think, covered that pretty well. There's no obligation of the district if you want to approve the resolution tonight. It just provides flexibility or optionality for the district if they want to reimburse themselves from a future bond issuance. It also does not have any costs to the district, so the district's not obligated to either reimburse itself at with the future bond proceeds, or is there any cost up to that point? So just options to the district. As Ms. Briones mentioned, it is for 3 projects. It's about $2.1 million between all 3 projects, between the fencing, the track and the drainage by the high school, as we understand it. And then we added some cushion there as well, just again, for more flexibility for the district. So $2.5 million is the recommended amount for the reimbursement resolution. Don, I'm not sure if there's anything else to add.
I think the important point for us to emphasize here is if you are looking at needing to spend money on any of these projects, if you don't pass this, then you're basically saying that you're going to pay it out of your current operating budget. And that could create more budget concerns for you. If you pass this, there's no obligation for you to issue any debt, but it gives you that flexibility to where you don't have to pay it out of the current year's budget. And you wouldn't have to necessarily look at doing a budget cut, because you could possibly, not for sure, but possibly finance this over a period of time, as opposed to having to pay it out of your operating budget all in this year. So it basically is relieving some pressure potentially on the district's operating budget. So I think that's if there's one point that we'd want to make, it's that we make that clear to you, because that's very important at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Ms. Briones, so the resolution that I had sent to you all for consideration had a blank. I know that Matt, Mr. Lujan had mentioned 2.5 million. We need to have as a matter of fact, if it's the pleasure of the board to adopt this resolution, then I would recommend that we'd say adopt the resolution for expenditures in an amount not to exceed, and then go ahead and the amount that you're looking at, we can fill in that blank in there. I know that, again, Mr. Lujan mentioned 2.5 million. Again, that number is more like a ceiling or something we know what amount that we're kind of looking at. It does not have to be of that full amount. You could decide that you only want to reimburse yourself for, let's say, $5,000. That's still okay. But you need, in order to make any kind of reimbursements with tax exempt obligations, you need to have this resolution in place.
Yes, sir.
Any questions?
You mentioned that $2.5 million would be a number not to exceed or recommend. Do you have estimates or anything done by professionals for the track, for the fencing and everything?
For the record, again, Matt Leon with the Strut so that's a very good question. These numbers we received from the district, and so that breakdown, that 2.1 is about $1.4 million for the track, $400,000 for the fencing and electrical upgrade, and about $300,000 for the drainage at the high school. And that's 2.1, and then there's a $400,000 of contingency or cushion there just to have more flexibility.
Okay. And I guess did we have drawings, or do we have anything having to do with the track or anything?
Yes, we have all of the blueprints for the track with all the estimates that it will cost.
So I got a quick question on the fencing. Weren't we supposed to get reimbursed by the state?
No.
No, on the fencing? I thought it was
We have a reimbursement for safety up to $200,000, which we were reimbursed last year.
Oh, so
This
we
is
were
phase three.
reimbursed.
Yeah, this is phase 3 of the fencing project, the final phase of the fencing project.
So we weren't gonna get a full refund on, like a full we weren't. Oh, okay.
No. Any other questions
Any
for
other
Matt?
questions? Thank you. So your recommendation, attorneys?
The recommendation is that the Board of Trustees consider approving a resolution on behalf of the Crystal City Independent School District establishing the district's intention to reimburse itself for the prior lawful expenditure of funds from the proceeds of tax exempt obligations to be issued to the district for authorized purposes and other matters in connection therewith for a dollar amount not to exceed $2.5 million.
$0.5
million.
Might just make a clarification on just
Yes, sir.
a couple things. So the projects that we're talking about are already in process.
Right.
So it's beyond just a professional estimate. we know, because there's contracts actually in place for, and the work is ongoing. As the gentleman from Estrada Hinojosa explained, this could potentially provide us some relief on the budgeting side. This will not provide any relief on the cash flow side, because we would still have to come out of pocket now for some future financing, which could reimburse us back, or it would give us back the money, which we would then have to repay out, because let's say we borrowed for it, you still need to repay that. So this isn't necessarily going to relieve any cash flow pressure that we're feeling right now, because if we're going to spend $400,000 on the fencing project, we still need to write $400,000 worth of checks now. What we're talking about is the possibility that, let's say in the spring, that we could get financing, and we would use that financing to repay ourselves for $400,000. That would provide us cash flow relief, but we would then need to make payments. It's a loan for $400,000 and make payments of that over some specified period of time. And of course, all of that would come back to the board for a decision. I think the way I describe this whole thing is, well, this is one of those things that if the board didn't pass, and later on you might come back and go and kick yourself for like, oh, why didn't we do that when we had the opportunity? And so I think wisely they're providing you the opportunity to sort of wrap the shell around these monies and say, okay, now these are potentially included if something happens later, as opposed to later going on, oh, we could have done that, we didn't do that, shoot. And I think that's sort of the reason this is being brought up now. Hope that helps.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Bonilla, second.
No second.
Second by board member Cruz Mata. Any questions, any more comments? Not, I need a vote. Vote 7-0. Motion passes. Item 9, informational discussion, superintendent's report, district 1 AD.
Our district enrollment on page 93, our active enrollment is 1,638. And as you all know, for state entitlement purposes, we are tracking our enrollment very, very closely. But as of November 15th, 2024, our active enrollment is 1,638. In terms of ADA on page 95, this is again as of November 15, 2024. Our average attendance is 92.61, so we are already at the 93% threshold. Continue to have conversations with campus. Campuses are doing an outstanding job of promoting attendance, celebrating attendance, incentivizing attendance. We've seen for the first time since COVID, actually, that we have grade levels that are already at a 97% attendance. We have campuses competing against each other, grade levels competing against each other. Last week, I believe our advertisement, Matthew, if I remember my numbers correctly, where's Matthew? Can you announce our numbers last week?
For last week, we had grade 3 of the highest was 95.28.
And do you have anything do you have anything for first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade? I want to start looking at the different grade levels to see, I mean, who's doing what. I know at the elementaries, a lot of things are going on, but I want to make sure also, high school, I mean.
Yeah, so we do have our.
Come on, just give us, I'll meet with Macronis later. Or...
Yes, we do get the report at the end of the week that has the entire grade level. The entire district. But for what we posted, it was just the top 3. So it was grade 7 at 95.20, and then grade 6 at a 95.06, for a district average of 93.4.
For last week.
For last week.
Because we keep track weekly. So the goal, as we presented to you in our district improvement plan, I mean, obviously we want attendance to be at 95%, but considering where we started, 94% is our target. and our campuses are holding strong. We have had conversation with campus administration, through Mrs. Garcia. We've had conversations with the truancy department regarding what we need to do to curb chronic absenteeism. Our goal is to close the fourth marking period because that's what the state uses to make calculations for our entitlements for the following school year. Our goal is to hold as close to 94% as possible by the end of mid-February when we close the marking period. So yes, our campuses are doing a lot of really great things for our campuses. I believe if not last week, the week prior, we saw 96 as our highest averages. So campuses are really pushing attendance. And of course, our kids can only benefit from increased instructional time. So thanks to the campuses for their great efforts. I know that every week we announce who's winning, and we know that their campuses are competing against each other. Grade 3, grade 7 are the highest attending grades right now. They're constantly in competition, so we encourage the friendly competition. We know that a lot of the fundraisers that the campuses are engaged in, a lot of the funds are being used for incentivizing attendance. So the students are benefiting from those fundraisers.
One last comment. I mean, I know in the past, I mean, we were using also the athletic department, to also, I mean, push the students that were involved in athletics to make sure that they would be coming or be using Coach Battle also.
So Coach Battle has a wildly important goal of his own that is relative to athletic attendance. Would you like to share your averages for first and second marking period?
Yes, thank you guys. Congratulations to our winners. Yes, my wildly important goal is the district's average at 95%. For 6 weeks, we fell short at 93. And this week we fell short again. This 6 weeks we were 94%. So we're getting towards that 95. It's just tweaks we can do here and there. We got some attendance incentives as well for athletics to kind of get them there. But it's not just for practices. This is for school. Like if you come to school, you're marked here. It's not just if you go to practice. If not, we'll be at 199% every time. Because everybody wants to come to practice. But the incentive is come to school. That's how we get our attendance.
Good for you.
We don't have any more questions on 9A. We'll move into 10, regional.
Mr. Alvarado will present to you the CCISD covered applications and prohibited technology plan, which is a state mandate from the governor's office.
Back when the 88th legislator, Senate Bill 1893 prohibited the use of certain social media applications and services on governmental entity electronic devices. Senate Bill 1893 created Government Code Chapter 620, which requires governmental entities to ban covered applications, including the social media service of TikTok and any applications or services developed or provided by the company ByteDance Limited. So for a while, our policy, CQC legal, we've had this covered for 2 years now. We've had it in policy. What we recently got an update with was that we needed a detailed plan on how districts were gonna go ahead and do the ban of TikTok and our services. I've gotten together with our technology department, myself and Jesse. I gave them the policy. They're working on the logistics of it, of actually getting it banned to our devices. As of right now, we believe that it's banned at the campus level. However, we found out today that we're still got to work on it here at central office for our services. So as it's coming up, we got till November 20th to be compliant. So we're working on it. But we were covered by policy, and we've got our plan put together. It's just a matter of going in there and getting it done.
TA will approve it, or?
No, our policy is already policy. We already have it in policy with CQC legal. It's just presenting that we do have a plan that will be amended and attached to CQC legal.
This is just for TikTok?
It's TikTok, and it has to do with ByteDance Limited. It's a company that oversees TikTok, but really it's called the TikTok law. I mean, it was, and it's Governor Abbott that passed through the legislature.
We have the same policy at the college.
Can you chair it, or?
Yeah.
Let's just see what you guys have, and.
It's a standard technology.
It's a standard, I went through TASB, and the lady, Miss Tammy Jordan, walked me through it, and she said, download this packet, go in there, and it's a standard for all districts that run through TASB, and this is a standard plan that was created for everybody. The only logistics is details of actual fun and just putting it together, little things that the district has done, which we have, we don't have too much iPads and anything, so that was easy because they do have the one where you can ban everything on one computer.
Oh, yeah, it's
The Chromebooks, I'm sorry, yeah.
Chromebooks, they're managed by our Google Suite, so we can block everything from there. And also our firewall is blocking TikTok already, so we're good there. Yeah,
If I may, the system, is it geared so that we can also, I don't know if it's possible, you don't want to bring it up, but let's say, kids bring their phones to the campuses.
Yes.
Some of them might have the TikTok account.
as long as they're not logged into our Wi-Fi, we can't control it. Now, if they're on their own personal hotspots or on their own data plans, we can block it, but that doesn't affect the district. The law just says that we need to have it off our
equipment.
our network.
Okay.
Our equipment and our network, yes, sir.
Any more questions for, yes, sir?
And this is just for Crystal City property, right?
Correct.
Personal.
Correct. We're a state entity, so anything with state money.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on information is 2324 Bilingual ESL program report.
Mrs. Sarah Garcia, Federal Programs Director, will present the annual evaluation of the Bilingual ESL program. Sarah?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, hello.
Okay, we're gonna start at the first page and just bear with me. So this is our 23-24 Bilingual ESL program report that we have to do annually. If you flip to the next page, because I don't have the board packet, so I'm just using my PowerPoint. Our English as a Second Language program at CCISD, there are two types of program. The first one is the ESL program. Base program model that is more geared towards our elementary campuses. And then we have our ESL pull-out program model that is more geared towards our secondary campuses. We do utilize both right now. The content is more for DTR, and the pull-out is for our Zavala, BJ, junior high, and high school. If you flip over to the next page, number of emergent bilingual students. In pre-K, this is all data for last year, for the 23-24 school year. Pre-K, we had one EB student, emergent bilingual student. Kinder, we had 2. First, we had 3. Second, we had 6. Third, we had 3. Fourth, we had 2. Fifth, we had 4. Sixth, we had 4. Seventh, we had 1. 8th, we had 2, and 9th, we had 4, 10th, we had 1, 11th, we had 2, and 12th, we had 1, for a total of 36 students. We did have, last year, we did have 1 reclassified student.
Ms. Garcia, are the numbers so small because the parents aren't filling out the home language survey?
No, they're small because we don't have the population because all new students, and it always starts at pre-K, 3 or 4, they all fill out the home language survey. And now TA has standardized that survey, that form, and we have to use the TA form. And we go by what the parents complete, which is the 2 questions, what is the student speaks at home and what the student speaks primarily. So if they put Spanish, then we are going to test the student. If they put Spanish, English, we're going to test the student. If they put English, then we're not going to test the student.
Okay.
So it's all based on the home language survey.
Okay.
And then the next page, first and second year monitor students in 10th grade, we had 1. And then if you flip over to the emergent bilingual student start data, my sheet is really small, but what I want you to primarily look at is that our students are reaching STAR approaches level, and they are reaching EOC approaches level. We've had several students also reach meets and masters level. So our students are being successful. They're being successful in the STAR and the end of course exams. I'm not going to go over the actual numbers tested because they are small numbers.
Doing well.
If you go into the next page talks about the TELPAS exam, academic progress in the language acquisition, which is a Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System. The TELPAS exam assesses the English language proficiency standards, the ELPs of the K-12 emergent bilingual students in 4 domains: the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Districts are required to implement as part of each foundation and enrichment subject to the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, the TEKS state required curriculum. So along with what the teachers are teaching in the classrooms, they also have to be hitting the ELPs, the English Language Proficiency Standards, and they have to be targeting those 4 areas: the listening, speaking, reading, and writing, because that is what the students will be assessed in come TELPAS time, which always begins in February. So if you flip over to the next page, we start off with the EP student TELPAS data. Dr. Tomas Rivera. I don't know if you want me to go over those numbers, because they're small numbers. But I can tell you that we had 6 students tested in kindergarten. And this is the TELPAS demographic proficiency by language area. And it gives you the numbers for the reading, listening, speaking, and writing. It'll tell you the number of students that were at the beginning level, how many students were in intermediate, how many students were in advanced, and how many students were in advanced high for all 4 areas. And then it also gives it to you by percentage. And if you flip over to the next page, you also have the data for 1st and 2nd grade, same format, and this data comes from the DMAC system. And you have 1st grade, you have 2nd grade, again, all students, were 7 students tested, and then it tells you how they did in reading, listening, speaking, and writing, again, by number and by percentage, and beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. 2nd grade, and then 3rd grade. And I have provided you with all the data for the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, all the way through 12. I don't know if you want me to review anything, but feel free to ask questions.
Some of these children, aside from being classified as emergent bilingual, are they also classified under other categories?
Such as special ed or homeless or foster care, yes. We have students that are they're identified as emergent bilingual, and they're also identified as special ed. 504 as well. So then I'm going to flip over to this page, bilingual exception. ESL waiver information. For last year, all of our teachers were certified as English as a second language teacher, so we did not need to submit any waivers for last year. And then on the next page, second language acquisition, professional development. We did have several professional developments throughout the year, primarily towards the end of the school year, because under the results-driven accountability, we were a determination level 4. So we did bring back the ELPS training, the PLDs training. We brought back the sheltered instruction training. We also conducted a root cause analysis of our program, a self-assessment. We created a strategic support plan that I had to submit to TEA. I had to meet with TEA 5 times, and it was all primarily to discuss what we were doing to improve our English as a second language program. And all of those professional developments were very helpful for our teachers, for our classrooms. And then on the last page, campus improvement plan, CCISD offered a series of professional development opportunities for the 23-24 school year. The professional development addressed the TEAGs and the ELPS. The district also offered a set of professional development for our administrators and teachers. For the past 2 years, we've had content-based vertically aligned PD for RLA, writing, math, science, social studies, and CTE. We've also had gifted and talented student leadership. We've worked on team building. We've worked on the multi-tiered systems of support for reading. We also have our new teacher orientation. And last year at our district leadership retreat, we worked on the book by Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions on the presentation? No, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The last thing that we have on the agenda, and that a revised agenda for 11 update and update on school district budget, finance, and related matter.
And Mr. Solomon will present an update to the board as to all of our work during the month of September and October leading up to November.
Good evening again. My name is Jeff Solomon. Happy to present to you this evening. So I'm a solopreneur. I have my own company called CFO on the Go, and I do consulting to various businesses, small and as well as school districts. So thank you for allowing me to present today. Over the last couple of months, what we've gone through is a process first of exploration and discovery. Going to move it, angle it more? Or?
Pull you up, yeah. I don't know if you can angle it like against the wall, Robert.
So the administrators can pay attention to it.
But Gabriel, will you be able to see?
I can.
Peggy, can you see?
I think that looks.
Take a look at what was going on and where we're at right now. Following that, we really went through a period of just sort of investigating and trying to figure things out, and then we started to move a little bit into remediation, try and figure things out. So this is just to sort of walk you through and give you an idea of where we're at. Oh. Didn't work. No, but if you want to press a button at a time on the keyboard, that'll work just well. Excellent. So one of the things I thought was important to do is go back and figure out how did we get here. So one of the things when I was originally presented with this is like, no, everything is fine in the district, and I don't know what happened last year. So once we started going back and taking a look, you can see 2018, 2019, more revenues than expenditures. Excellent. $1.6 million. It's a touchscreen. Next year, same, similar, not quite as much, but again, more revenue than expenditure, $1.3 million. Every time you see a positive number, this is putting money into what we all call the fund balance. The fund balance is not a bank account. It's not money that we set aside over in the corner. It's in a specialized bank account. We don't touch it. The fund balance actually is the balance of all the funds the district can use to operate. And that money goes, that balance goes up and down every day. And so often school districts refer to, I have $5 million in my fund balance. Usually that means on the last day of your fiscal year, your auditors came in and audited it and provided you an annual financial report, an audit, an AFR, and they said, your fund balance was $5 million. You're like, great, we've got $5 million. They usually do that before the end of December. They're looking back to August 31st. When they actually present the report, you don't even have $5 million. You have some other different number. Might be higher, might be lower, but it's a different number. It's never the same. But August 31st, you had $5 million. Again, I'm just making up a number. And on September 1st, you went and paid a bill, and it dropped below $5 million. So annually, grossed up. Here again, 2021 was the big COVID year, $1 million. Now, 21-22, what happened? Well, in 21-22, revenues actually were a little bit less. And that goes back to some of this where enrollment had dropped, and our revenue is tied to attendance, which is a feature of enrollment. But you'll notice all along, our expenditures are up. And this year, despite the fact that we had probably a couple $1 million in ESSER monies covering some of our expenses, we still managed to lose $600,000. The year after that, again, 22-23, another ESSER year. You can see our revenues went up pretty decently. Our expenditures shot up even more, went up almost $4 million. We lost $2.5 million. So what does this mean? I think at one point you had a $9 million fund balance. And you lost a little over $500,000, now you're under $850,000. You lose 2.5, now you're at about 6. That's where everyone does this magic. We had $6 million. Well, before we get to this last year, everyone's thinking we got $6 million. We're good. Then we know we had the problem with the rollover of missed attendance targets. And so what happens is at the beginning of a school year, TA thinks you're going to have 1,700 students. And they don't know, no one knows how many students you're going to have in a year. We think we're going to have 95% attendance. Maybe we end up with 93 or 94 or 96, but we don't know. TA starts going, we make payments because we're going to have to pay our piece. TA is going to have to pay their piece of state aid. So they start making payments to you at the beginning of the year based on the estimate, knowing we won't know till the end of the school year in the summer what your attendance actually is. So they start making payments to you. And lo and behold, you get to the end of the year and you go, you didn't have 1,700 students, you had 1,500 students. But we paid you starting in September and October money. Well, that was too much money. We need to get that back. And that's what happened multiple years in a row. And they know you spent that money. We wrote a check to you in September. We wrote another in October. There's no way in July we think that you're still holding on to that money. We know it's gone. So what we will do is we will just deduct it from the next year. And starting in about 2019, 2020, you started having that going on in the background. Now, if you knew where to look, it's out there publicly, but that was going on. So by the time we get to 23, 24, that number had now grown to over $4 million. And whereas you thought you were going to get a lot more in revenue, you didn't. And again, expenses went up another $2 million. So rough estimate, we don't have the audited numbers, rough estimate is there was an $11 million loss last year. That's sort of the background of where we were coming into when we picked things up in September. So back around in this area, at the end of this year in July, and August, this $11 million started to show up in, we were having problems with cash flow. We didn't have enough money. We should have, why don't we have money? We should have had more money. And that's where that's where I came in the picture, and we sort of picked everything up. Can we go forward another slide? This obviously just shows it in graphic form. So you can see it's tracking pretty close. Blue is revenue. We'd rather have blue above the red. Here is where we cross the Rubicon, and then by here, we're way upside down. Next slide. So this is what, now we're starting to investigate and take a look at what's going on. This first column is the budgeted revenue that we thought there was in the budget that was included. And then the second column is a revision of all of the revenue. So there is the budget that this esteemed body passed, and separate from that, there was a budget in the computer system, Ascender. These are the numbers that came out of Ascender, which are different than what you were presented. I can't tell you why. I wasn't the one who presented it. I'm not sure why. So this shows $13 million of revenue. I can tell you where this number comes from. When the budget in Ascender in the computer system was developed, it took what happened last year and used that as the baseline. So on the previous slide, 2 slides back, we showed $13 million in revenue for the year. $13 million in revenue for the year. But last year is not like this year. So that $4 million rollover of TA paying us too much money doesn't exist this year, because that's gone. We're done doing that. We paid our fee. They've taken their piece out of us, and there's no more left to take. So coming into this year, believe the more realistic number is something, we'll roughly call that $18 million. And so we believe that's the revenue that the district will receive. So that's the budget. If we wanted to be balanced, that's the budget we need to live in locally. This is not the money that we receive for INS, for debt service to pay our bonds. This is not the money that we get from grants. This is not the money that we have for the food service program. It's just what we call the local budget. And you can see out of here where here's the sum of all just the tax revenue, 10.8 million. That represents 61% of everything we're going to see. Just the current year is 59%. Can you go to the next slide? So then we start taking a look at the expenses. And again, this comes out of Ascender. This is the core system. And so taking a look at what was actually, I take it back. This is not in Ascender. This is what the budget that you were presented. And when we take the budget that you had, that you passed, that was a balanced budget, it was a little short of $27 million, and you start pulling out some of the pieces that are not in the local budget, so the food service budget is not in there. So you pull out food service, and there's $24 million in revenue. That's what the budget you originally had that had a balance almost 27 million. 24 million of it was local, and it includes all of the revenue for debt service, because that's the way this district has put debt service in together with it. And here, once we pull everything out, is all of the expense line items by function. And this was the original budget, and even though you thought you were balanced, once you start to pull out the different pieces, local, debt service, food service, this actually is a deficit budget. It was buried by the fact that you're making money in one place and losing money in another place, and you put it together and suddenly everything looks balanced. Go to the next slide. It's going to lay over this. This is the budget that was in Ascender. One more. This is the budget that was in Ascender for expenses. So you can see that, again, we talked about this number's not a correct number, but it's what we're working with in the computer system. And these are the expenses, and you can start to see some dramatic differences. So we had already seen prior the most dramatic differences in plant maintenance and operations. You were given and approved a budget for $985,000. You went and looked at Ascender. It had $3.5 million as the cost for for plant maintenance and operations. We went and looked in even more detail. It's over $1 million just in salaries. That's before you have any supplies to maintain, any contracts to maintain, or operate anything to clean, basic cleaning supplies, any of that's not included, was well over $1 million. So already there were things that were problematic. As we're going through this discovery, we're finding out, oh gosh, look at all this stuff that's going on. Look at some of these things that were misses. Go to the next slide. So then we've started working to revise the budget. Now, we're not going to bring a formal revision, but we just want to give the board an update of where we're at and what we're working towards. So the revised budget was on the slide two ago. I believe about $18 million will be the revenue that we'll receive based on what we're getting in tax revenue, what we're going to get for the state in state aid, and what we get federally for Max Schar's money. Next slide. And then these are the revised numbers that we put together. I've been working with Ms. Briones to work on a function by function, and these have each one of these has hundreds of line items behind them. I've got a spreadsheet that's 1,500 lines long that's got every single line item, and so this is the summary of where we're at. Once we started here, we laid over what was real, what was really in the system, and then now we've made adjustments to that, to what we think we can live with. And so this shows currently a deficit of 5.3 million. We are not done. We know that is not going to work for the district. We need to have, we also realize that the district cannot operate currently at an $18 million. There's no way we could get the budget that you passed that had $26 million in expenses. There's no way we're going to be able to get the district functionally operate inside an $18 million box. So we're shooting for a goal of somewhere between $20 to $21 million. And if we can get the expenditures into that box for this year, with plans next year to get to a balanced budget, that is something that will work for us. We've talked to the financial advisors because we know we're going to need to go out and get some help for this. We think that conceptually will work because we're going to have to sell this to a lender. Go to the next slide. Some current things that we've done. Again, these are just proposals that are inside of that revised budget. Nothing has been approved. We haven't done anything positionally or anything. So we've made some reductions to some of the programs. There are some positions that were vacant. So through attrition, we would propose to eliminate those positions. We found some places where there seemed to be some duplication of positions, that there were more staff than we felt that were needed, and we thought we can live with less. Talked about doing a hiring freeze, so we're not going to be hiring anybody. So if someone were to give their resignation, then we would just, that position at that point we'd figure out a way to live without that. And then here and there, we've done some other spending reductions. Keep going. So one of the things we did was we right-sized the construction spending. Again, because there was a rollover from last year to this year. Last year, you did a lot of construction. There was $1.8 million in construction last year, and so that in the budget was rolled right over. We're not doing $1.8 million related to the stuff we talked about, the track, the fencing. It's about $1.1 million. We corrected the maintenance operations budget that was short. We've talked about making changes to eliminate the PK3 program and what that would look like. We've talked about changing the ratios, it says rations, that's a typo. Ratios for the PK4 program. Again, we're trying to do stuff in where we can make stuff that has a financial impact, but we can, as much as we can, minimize the educational impact. We've moved where we can personnel that were locally funded to maximize the amount that we can put into grants. So we've moved some people around in terms of the way how we're going to pay them, where that funding source is going to come from. We know at this point that we're going to need to obtain some level of financing because we were short this past year, and we know we borrowed some money, and we know that based on having a deficit budget, we're gonna need to go into that to cover the shortfall. We also know in the last month, we've had the credit rating agencies. There were credit rating agency calls in the late summer. And once all the information that we uncovered about the budgetary situation became known through our financial advisors, through Estrada Hinojosa, went back and had ratings calls with them. As a result, they ended up reducing our ratings, downgrading our ratings. So what the impact of having a reduced rating, financial rating is, it reduces the market who would be interested in lending us money. And those, naturally, anyone who's going to want to lend us money is going to take advantage of the fact that they know they're in a reduced market, they're going to charge us more. We know that on our part, as a district, we're going to need to show some significant reductions. We're going to need to show that to the marketplace in order to be attractive. And our financial advisors have just said they need to see our pain. So we're going to need to make some cuts that result in some pain for the district. We need to participate in what's going on. We can't just nibble around the edges and expect somebody to come in here and save us. In the same way that we know a $5 million deficit budget isn't going to cut it, because if you were a lender and you were coming in to the district and saying you have an $18 million revenue budget and you have a $5.5 million deficit, can I please borrow some money? You would probably tell them, no, you need to do more work. So we think we probably need to get to 21 million in expenses. We might need to even get under 20 million, so we're working towards that. Again, the budget I showed you tonight is revised as 23.5 million, which is currently about a $5.5 million deficit. One of the ideas that has been floated has been if we did a 5% salary reduction, that could reduce the expense budget by $800,000. The advantage of that is that you're not reducing staff. So you still have teachers in every classroom, staff in the offices, wherever you need them. It hurts, it's the pain that everyone would have to be asked to contribute to. It's equitable across everybody, but it will be, there's a lot of different ways you get to $800,000 reduction. One would be just start eliminating positions. This doesn't eliminate the positions, it just reduces the pay for it. So a $21 million budget would still be a $3 million deficit. A $20 million budget would be a $2 million deficit. That's just the straight out math. Additional reductions are going to require some reductions in personnel. That's just the reality right now. So if you take a look at inside it, there's a different way to look at the budget. We're at about $17 million in personnel costs today. We only have $18 million to spread around. There's no way we're going to operate the district on $1 million. Also knowing that $1 million in the budget is going towards facility stuff, some of the facility, the track and the fencing. Even at a $21 million budget, it's really hard to operate the district outside of personnel of $4 million. That's what we're going to try to do. We're going to do our best, but that's every contracted service we have, every material we purchase, curriculum, and any other expenses that we have that is non-personnel related. And the loan's going to need to cover the deficit, plus we borrowed about $2.7 million in INS funds. That's money that's allocated to pay down bonds. Now, if there's a silver lining in all that, it's the fact that this district had more than enough money. So the money that was borrowed in INS, we didn't actually need in order to make bond payments. We had over-collected money probably over multiple years, and that balance built up. Had the district then taken that overage and paid down bonds, it wouldn't have been available to us. So we, in essence, borrowed for ourselves. It's not great, but it was actually what happened. And we do need to pay that back. And didn't know if you had any questions. Okay, probably.
Any questions from the board?
Is there any, have you found any, what's the root cause especially, I mean, the first line for plant maintenance was 999,000.
I cannot figure out where that number came from. We have worked hard to try and figure out where that number was developed. I just don't know.
And that number was developed not by a sender, right? It was developed somebody.
Yes.
It was developed by.
Third party.
Third party.
Yeah, so the district had a CFO consultant. My understanding is he's the one who presented the budget. Again, it was not, that was the biggest shock we had when we looked in the sender to see what it is, because the sender tied to expenses we had last year. Well, most of that, in most districts, in this district, over 80% of every dollar you spent goes to personnel. So if you had $3.5 million of expenditures last year, in plant maintenance operations, it isn't 80% of every dollar, because you probably spend closer to 50% on people and another 50% on supplies and materials. But you're looking at something $985,000 versus $3.5 million. That's a huge impact. I do not have any idea where that number came from. Because again, it wasn't even it doesn't even cover the personnel costs. But the good thing is we've identified everything. I've got a spreadsheet multiple versions of it that I've shared with Ms. Briones. We have everything dialed down to the line item. So when we're showing this, we know everything is included in there, that we aren't missing stuff.
Question, when we approved the budget for the 24, 25 years, I mean, we were told that, I mean, we have the money for that and everything, and we're not being told the truth, right?
I mean, I don't know what to tell you other than that those numbers sort of speak for themselves. And like I said, I have everything down, and I've been open and shared it with Ms. Briones. I'm not hiding in it. I'm not going in the closet and working on it and presenting you a number at the end. I've been really public about it. And all those numbers that we're working on are revisions of things that are in a sender that people across the district can take a look at.
Quick question, just not what's the outlook, but like how long would you see us getting out of this?
I think it's going to take a couple of years to get out of it. So I think we've been talking with the financial advisors. We think realistically, if we need, let's say, a $5 million loan, we were talking about today, there's no way we could do a 1-year $5 million loan. Because you're looking, if you take a look at it and you had a $26 million expense budget, you go $18 million, and I need to pay $5 million back in 1 year, it means you got to live off $13 million. We have a $26 million budget of expense. There's no way you're living off $13 million. Kids are just, I don't know, come to school and go to the cafeteria where they watch them. No one's going to class because we don't have enough staff. That just would not work. So we're looking at it's a multiple year. It might be 5 years might be a realistic thing. It's going to take some work because we're going to need to get that budget reduced even further just for this year. For next year, in order to, let's say we get to $20 million this year as our expenditures and show a $2 million deficit, well, next year we need to be balanced. That needs to be the assumption that next year we have, so you're reducing another $2 million next year, plus you're going to reduce a little bit more because you're going to need to make payments on that loan. So if I get a $5 million loan for 5 years, I need to pay back $1 million plus interest every year. So we're going to do that and do a little bit more cutting beyond that. And so the longer window we can have to repay that, the more breathing room it will allow us in the shorter term. And I couldn't speak to specifically what cuts we're going to make and where we're going to make them. We're looking all over the place. Leaning on Ms. Briones, she's the subject matter expert in terms of what will work and what won't work. I can make all kinds of suggestions about cutting costs from the outside that are completely unrealistic and won't actually work. So that's not necessarily going to be helpful. So it's something that we're working on. The plan, as we discussed today, is we would be back within 4 weeks to have some finalized version, which, with targeting that $20 million to see how close to that we can get, or maybe even beat that. And at that point, we would have a list of exactly what we've talked to the attorneys about what needs to be done, what we need to establish, and what we need to disclose at that time.
Now, as far as the safety fences and track and construction drainage and everything that we had, is that money already earmarked to be used and completed? Or is that on the, to lower down the budget, is that on the table?
For the fencing and the track, it's earmarked already.
It's included in the budget. So like, one of the things we talked about, what if we just didn't do the track? Because they haven't done the work yet. The problem is they tore up the old track. So there's nowhere to run track. So that would be a problem. The concrete's a really hard surface to put kids out on. So it's unfortunate that as part of the work on the turf, that the track got torn up, because now that's not there. But whether earmarked or not, we're gonna have to make sure it's earmarked, because that work is gonna need to get done.
Okay. Now, earlier in the year, they lowered, the tax rate was lowered. Could that have been an issue? I mean, I believe.
Tax rate?
Yeah, the tax rate here was lowered for the M&O to be able to budget out the 27 million.
Yeah, so this is more into, I'll try and make this simple. So, because the way school finance works is a little bit complicated. There's a detailed formula, a complex formula to figure out how much you're entitled to get as a school district based on student attendance. So you do all that math and figure out, and you pin a number. Now, how you get paid for that has to do with taxes and state aid. But whether the rate is higher or lower, a higher tax rate will mean you'll get less state aid. Because we say, the calculation says I'm supposed to get this. If my tax rate is here, I get this much state aid. If my tax rate is up here, I get less state aid. So messing around with your tax rate won't make a difference. The other thing is, you actually can't mess around with your tax rate that much. Information is submitted to the comptroller in July, August of each year. They come back and tell us, this is your maximum compressed rate. There is then a system of pennies where you can add to that. A board can approve the first 5, what they call golden pennies, and this board at some point did do that. So we're adding 5 cents on to the rate we were given. In order to go beyond that, you need to go to a public election. That's probably something that the board should look at doing in May for next year, because that will help our revenues. That's the way to get around that and start to get more revenue into the school district, short of growing the district in some way that you don't necessarily have control on. Getting more kids to enroll and having them show up more often, which we're working on having them show up more often, but you don't have a lot of control over how many kids enroll in school.
Jeff, do you want to briefly share with the board of veteran and how that would work?
Yeah, so adding that extra tax rate is called, it's a VATRE, or voter approved tax rate election. So it needs to go to the voters. It would be, let's say we put it on the ballot for May. Ms. Briones' staff can talk about it all they want until this august body decides you want to go ahead and do that and put it on the ballot. Once you put it on the ballot, the district itself can no longer lobby for it, can no longer talk about it in any way other than factual. So if someone would ask, well, what would this mean to me? You can say, okay, well, what this would mean will be your rate would go from X to Y, and the school district would receive this amount of income. Individually, the board would be expected to be doing all of the community work in terms of getting community support. The district can certainly print signs that say, vote for Prop A, or whatever it ends up getting called. We've done some mathematical calculations on that. So the system that's set up, again, you've already authorized the first 5 pennies. Those are called golden pennies because they have a higher yield than the next group of pennies. And penny, it's 1 cent per $100 of appraised value. So there's 8 golden pennies. You can do the first 5. So you grab the next 3 golden pennies. And then the last pennies, there's another 9 pennies. They're copper pennies. You get less on that, less yield back on that. You earn less back on that, with one other problem, which is often that will put you into what's known as recapture. And recapture is when, if this is your entitlement, this is the calculation, instead of your tax rate, your tax collections being here, they end up here. And when they're up here, you still only get to keep this money. So I'm down here, I get all my taxes and they give me state aid. Now I'm a number, now my taxes up here, I have to write a check to TEA for the difference because I collected more than I was entitled to. But those copper pennies, you get to keep some of it, you just won't get to keep all of it. And so we've done calculations and you're looking at, I want to say it was about $800,000 if we did the whole boat per year for the foreseeable future of additional money. You'd be paying back some to the state, but the net to the district. And that is absolutely one way that would help the district to bring in more revenue. I know it's complicated. It's not a simple system because there's a bunch of different things iterative on top of each other. But it's 17 total cents above whatever your determined rate is. You get 8 copper, you've already got the first 5, and 9, or 8 golden and 9 copper.
I have a question. So you mentioned earlier you're looking at different avenues to see where we can get money. Have we looked into maybe refinancing bonds in order to get them at a lower rate where we can maybe save in the future?
What?
I'm gonna let the expert talk about that. I give you my unprofessional opinion, which is with the increase of rates in the last couple of years, it might not be as attractive as it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Mr. Mata. We have looked at refinancing, and there's going to be some strategy behind that. Obviously, with the downgrade that was mentioned, that would affect the rate or the rate that the refunded bonds or refunding bonds would receive. So we did look at that. Right now, we looked at current market rates with some cushion, and there's a little bit of negative savings up front. Overall, there is positive savings, but we'd have to look at how to structure that appropriately so it wouldn't hurt the district up front because there would be a negative savings or you'd be paying more in your new debt service versus the bonds that would be refunded.
The other thing about that is you have maintenance and operations, M&O, INS, interest and sinking. You're talking about changing around how much interest the district would owe on the INS side. That will not help us on the M&O side because you can't move the money across. So there's that, and that was the problem with us borrowing $2.7 million was we crossed over from one to the other. And they need to be, when the taxpayers pay for INS, that's for the bonds. And if they pay less, I guess the one thing would be if we could figure out a way to drop that rate, then maybe the overall tax rate, if we're doing a Vader, won't increase. So if you're a taxpayer, when you get your tax statement as a homeowner or a property owner, it doesn't tell you M&O this, INS this, you just see the rate. So let's say it's 80 cents of M&O and 20 cents of INS, you just see $1. You don't know the split. So if we could do something where we're lowering the INS rate at the same time we're doing this Vader, and it was $1 last year and it's still $1 this year, that's something you can sell. That's something we can talk about. That's something, a way you can market the Vader. This won't increase your tax bill. But you can't, it's a great idea, but ultimately, that's not where we're having any of this cash flow problems aren't really happening on the INS side. We're having no problems with that. We're actually collecting more than enough this year to pay for the bonds.
Have there been any calculations or anything done? I believe the homestead exemption is going up to 100,000, isn't it? Or that's what I've heard. How is that going to affect our?
So voters passed that a year in November, and it was retroactive to last year. So that already happened.
Okay.
So there's no impact to that. We're already in that. Last year, we were already living in that world.
And they could bring it down again, right?
They could what, drop the homestead?
Well, the state legislator, every 2 years they meet and, what can happen.
anything, I mean, it's all kind of, if you want to talk about that, it opens up all kinds of possibilities. So it's very possible, as it was 2 years ago, that the legislature will change what's known as the basic allotment. So we're doing all that math and that calculation, how much we get per student when they attend. They haven't changed that number since 2019. So one of the reasons every school district in Texas is suffering right now, because we're still operating at 2019 revenues. So you get 20 to 25% inflation all over the place. You've given raises to teachers. We're still getting revenue for students identical to what we're getting in 2019, 2020.
So
It's been a long time.
we have RAC on Wednesday. We have the superintendent's meeting on Wednesday at Region 20. And all of the newly elected state officials will be there representing the different districts. And I know basic allotment is going to be a conversation that we're going to entertain. It'll be interesting to see what we bring back.
Yeah, I think I've looked at it, and if you look at the basic allotment is about $6,000. And if you look at it in current dollars, that should be about $7,500 per student. So that's I wouldn't bank on that, but that's a possibility that could help the entire situation look better with an infusion across the board for next school year. They're not going to do anything. Because this year's already budgeted.
That's not
They did in the last biennium.
that's not immediate, you know.
No, if they did that, it would affect the 25-26 school year. But I wouldn't write any budget or projection based on the legislature doing something, because 2 years ago, it looked like they were going to do stuff and they didn't do it.
Percentage.
All right. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Ms. Bernardes, can this be presented to the public or put on the website or something?
Yeah, we're live streaming.
Well, can it be placed on the website to
The
actually?
presentation, once we finish with budget workshops,
Okay.
we'll post it. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon.
Last thing that we have on the agenda